And you are listening to Watchmen on the Pod. All right, we're going to pick back up in our book reading Black Goo, The Living Darkness. Hold on 1 minute. I do want to get, because, okay, was written, I'm sorry, by D. Hansmann. That's what I needed to see. We are in chapter 7. Here we go. The contact attempt. What happened during the secret experiments? When the researchers realized that black goo didn't just react but interacted, the next step was almost inevitable. They wanted to find out if real communication was possible. No laboratory wanted to admit it had authorized this attempt. Officially, no contact attempt was ever initiated. Unofficially, however, that's exactly what began, and it ended differently than anyone expected. The first attempt took place in an isolated military laboratory. The room was completely sterile, no metal, no light reflections, no sounds. The substance was secured in a transparent container. 3 scientists stood behind it, separated by a thick layer of reinforced glass. The goal wasn't to manipulate the substance, but to observe it. The plan was simple: send stimuli, measure reactions. The first stimulus was acoustic, I'm sorry. They played individual tones, simple, clear frequencies. At first, nothing happened. Then, after a few seconds, the mass began to pulsate, not violently, not chaotically, but in rhythm. Each tone seemed to reverberate through the substance as if it were feeling it. The researchers were thrilled. This was the first measurable evidence of pattern recognition. The second stimulus was visual. They projected points of light, geometric shapes, movements. The black goo followed the light points like an eye tracking motion. And then something happened that wasn't in the protocol. The mass briefly formed a structure that looked like a perfect circle, a symbol, a reaction, or a mirror of what it had just seen. The third stimulus, is where things got uncomfortable. They tried to send electrical impulses to the substance, similar to what you do in neural tests. The researchers wanted to measure whether it would return a pattern distinct from mere stimulus response. The first impulse produced only a slight twitch. The second showed a clear surge in the mass. At the third impulse, a thin strand of black goo shot upward toward the container wall, directly at the scientist. One researcher stepped back. Another later wrote in his notes, "I had the feeling it knew where I was standing." From this point on, the character of the experiment changed. The substance no longer seemed passive, but attentive, almost further. They wanted to test whether the substance would react to human emotional stimuli. One researcher stepped closer to the glass, placed his hand against it, and spoke calmly, almost in a whisper. No commands, no data, just human presence. What happened next defies scientific description. The mass moved slowly toward his hand, not randomly, but purposefully, precisely. It formed a kind of tip that traveled to exactly where his palm rested behind the glass. Several cameras recorded the black goo forming a structure that looked like a fine network of tiny threads, as if it were feeling its way. Ooh, that's freaky. The researcher later reported that at that moment he felt an unnatural warmth on his back, even though he hadn't touched the glass. Some suspect it was psychosomatic. Others say the substance can influence fields we don't yet understand. The contact attempt was aborted at this point, officially because the reaction had become too unpredictable, unofficially because the researchers sensed that something was passing between them, not just stimuli, but a kind of understanding, a connection, perhaps too far, perhaps too deep. That wasn't the last attempt. In a second laboratory with a new team, they went even further. They connected the substance directly to a neural interface, an experiment that was never meant to go public. Something happened that shattered every protocol. The substance began not only to mirror the interface's electrical signals, but to expand them. It returned patterns no one had sent, impulses no one understood, data that seemed like fragments of a language. A scientist later said in an anonymous report, it was as if it wasn't just listening, but answering, and as if our questions were dumber than we thought. The reactions became so intense that the experiment was immediately terminated. The substance was isolated, the laboratory sealed, all participants placed under secrecy agreements. Since then, the official position has been dialogue is not possible. Unofficially, those who were there know the truth. First contact happened long ago, and perhaps we weren't the ones who initiated it. Chapter 8: The Echo of the Earth. Connection to ancient energies and frequencies before modern laboratories. Frequency generators and measuring instruments entered the picture. Something had existed far longer, the resonance of the earth itself. Every movement, every layer, every stone carries vibrations within it. Some are audible, others are so deep they fall below the threshold of perception. And it's precisely in this invisible range that black goo seems to find something we're only beginning to grasp, a connection to energies older than any civilization. When researchers began exposing the mass to Schumann frequencies, the Earth's natural renaissances, something happened that no one expected. The substance reacted more strongly to these deep planetary vibrations than to any artificial frequency. It was as if it recognized something like an animal catching the scent of home after a long absence. In one of the early experiments, the mass began to move as soon as the fundamental frequency of 7.83 hertz was reached. That's so weird. I'm going to tell you why that's weird, guys. I just started listening to 7.83 hertz uh, last week, I think it was. And let me tell you what, it puts me to sleep. I can't explain it. It's the weirdest thing in the whole wide world. It's probably too much information. But I did. I started listening to 7.83 hertz. They call it the Schumann resonance. I don't even know what Schumann is, to be honest with you. I should probably investigate these things before I begin to do them, I guess. It was a structure, lines, curves, patterns that almost seemed like symbols. Some researchers were reminded of an ancient megalithic structures, circles, spirals, geometric intersections, not chaotic forms, but precise patterns reminiscent of Stonehenge, Gobelektik Tepe, or the Nazca lines. One scientist later put it this way: it didn't react to our signal, it reacted to the earth itself. This observation led to a radical hypothesis. Black goo could be a kind of natural renaissance reservoir, a living matrix that not only absorbs energy but understands its meaning. Perhaps even something that has existed underground for millennia and is only truly itself there. Several independent groups tested the substance with ancient sound patterns, Tibetan mantras, Egyptian scales, even reconstructed Sumerian sounds. The reactions varied each time, but were always more intense than with artificial signals. The mass seemed to leap at certain frequency combinations as if it remembered them. Things grew even more mysterious when researchers examined historical data from ancient cultures. Many ancient structures, pyramids, temples, stone circles, weren't erected randomly, but at precise points where Earth's renaissance is particularly strong. These places have been considered energy centers for centuries, and the patterns black goo produced under certain frequencies match these geometric alignments with astonishing precision. This raises an uncomfortable question. Does black goo react to these places because they're natural or because they were influenced by something with the same origin? A seismic team conducted a particularly remarkable experiment, testing how the substance reacted to slight tremors similar to tectonic signals. The result was as unexpected as it was disturbing. Black goo began to align itself as if synchronizing with the direction of vibration. At certain frequencies, vertical patterns formed almost like antennas. At others, the mass spread out in a fan shape as if absorbing energy. Hmm. There were even reports that the mass began to glow briefly, a dark, almost blue black shimmer that lasted only seconds. The sensors spiked at that moment, as if the substance had not only received energy, but generated it. The longer they researched, the clearer it became. Black goo is not a foreign body on this planet. It doesn't behave like something new here. It behaves like something that knows the earth. Perhaps it's not an intruder, but a legacy, a connection to energies that were here before us, a Renaissance form we've ignored for millennia because we couldn't understand it. And so a thought emerges, one that is both fascinating and terrifying. If black goo hears the echo of the earth, what does it really hear? And why does it answer? Chapter 9, The Dark Mirror. Emotions, Fear, and Consciousness Renaissance. When researchers began taking the substance's emotional component seriously, their view of black goo changed fundamentally. Until then, they had tried to treat it as a physical phenomenon, calculable, measurable, controllable. But the experiments revealed something hardly anyone wanted to say out loud. The substance didn't just react to stimuli, it reacted to us. Not to our words, not to our gestures, but to what was happening inside us. The first signs were subtle. In experiments with multiple people in the room, the mass behaved differently each time, even though external conditions were identical. A protocol notes the substance showed increased activity as soon as a person with elevated stress levels was present. At first, this was dismissed as coincidence, but the more they tested, the clearer it became. Black goo mirrored emotional states, especially those who weren't openly displayed: fear, uncertainty, aggression, or in rare cases, calm. It was as if this mass had no expression of its own, but instead shaped itself from our innermost states. The Renaissance of Fear. In a later, strictly classified test series, a group of volunteers with different emotional profiles entered the observation room one after another. Excuse me. The substance reactions varied dramatically. With highly tense individuals, the mass, began to pulsate. With those harboring suppressed anger, it formed sharp, spike-like protrusions. With depressive states, it became sluggish, heavy, almost frozen. And with someone who remained consciously calm, it smoothed out as if calming itself. But the most disturbing thing was how strongly it reacted when fear entered the equation. Pure, genuine fear. In these moments, the substance seemed more alive, faster, more attentive. It developed movements that seemed almost curious. Some researchers felt observed, not by eyes, but by a consciousness that read emotions like an open book. One of the lead researchers noted in his private journal, black goo is not a monster, but it senses what triggers the monster in us. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Chapter 10, Prometheus Code, How Hollywood Hides the Knowledge. Before the term black goo even surfaced publicly, a select few insiders had known for decades that films function as both distraction and showcase. Hollywood has been playing a double game for years. It entertains, but it also reveals. The so-called Prometheus Code lies precisely in this gray zone. The principle is simple. The bigger the lie, the more openly the truth is hidden within it. Because no one believes a science fiction film shows anything more than fantasy. When Prometheus hit theaters in 2012, only a few viewers noticed how brazen the film was. Black, intelligently reactive liquid that rewrites biological codes. A substance that can both create and destroy. A mass that responds to consciousness. This wasn't a new idea from the screenwriters. It was an echo of top secret research reports from the 80s. Ridley Scott had invented these images. He had seen them. One of the production company's advisors at the time, a man who remains anonymous to this day, reportedly said in private, "We were only allowed to show what was going to leak to the public anyway. The rest was rewritten. Look at the scenes more closely, and you'll recognize patterns that bear a striking resemblance to real reports. The substance in the film lives as both parasite and creator. It forms bodies, dismantles organisms, absorbs information, and never appears chaotic while doing so." Witnesses of military experiments with black goo describes this exact behavior. The similarity is so striking it almost seems brazen. Here's the strange thing. In interviews, Scott spoke unusually often about ancient myths, forgotten writings, and knowledge not meant for all ears. That wasn't typical PR talk. There was a warning underneath. There was a warning underneath. But Prometheus was only the tip of the iceberg. There had been hints before in the X-Files. A black alien liquid appeared that could control people. In the X-Files Fight the Future, it was described as a collective consciousness. In Stargate, the idea of an extraterrestrial, shape-shifting intelligence was normalized. Even the Matrix suggested that machines and organic matter aren't as clearly separable as we believe. Hollywood doesn't scatter this knowledge randomly. It's a form of psychological preparation. The masses are slowly conditioned to accept a reality that will inevitably come to light. The more people the more people know something that I said that so wrong, forgive me. The more people know something from movies, the less shocked they are when it turns out to be real. The military calls this controlled disclosure, a managed revelation. The Prometheus Code doesn't mean Hollywood voluntarily reveals truth, but that it's deliberately used to package complex information into digestible morsels. This way, the population is prepared without even realizing it. And the unsettling part, once you become aware of how many films and series follow this pattern, you get the impression that the entertainment industry has been working for decades on something far greater than mere fiction. Hollywood often doesn't show the future. It shows what has long been the present, just hidden, repackaged, and buried behind symbols. The Prometheus Code isn't the art of telling a story, it's the art of camouflaging a truth. Sometimes the camouflage is so good that even those who could recognize it prefer to look away. Chapter 11. The voice of the substance reports of communication with black goo. Officially, black goo is described as a reactive, non-biological liquid of unknown origin. Unofficially, it's described differently, as something that listens. The first reports of possible communication surfaced in the 80s, but they immediately vanished from all records. Witness statements were redacted, researchers reassigned, laboratories closed. Still, fragments leaked out, and these fragments point to something many don't want to believe. The substance responds. A former technician who worked at the Falklands Discovery Site later reported anonymously that the black goo sometimes reacted to the emotional state of those present. When someone became nervous, the mass moved faster. When anger, it grew darker. With fear, it contracted, as if absorbing energy. He described it this way: it was as if it had no ears, but it heard everything anyway. Wow. Boy. Researchers who worked closer to the substance described something almost be called that could almost be called telepathic pressure, a feeling that forces itself upon you, wordless but unmistakable. Some call it intuition, others mental feedback. Still others describe it as foreign thoughts sliding into your mind, like waves crashing against the pier. One scientist, who later disappeared under mysterious circumstances, reportedly said, "When you're close enough, you realize you're not thinking alone." An internal report mentions a case classified as too sensitive, even among experts. A soldier monitoring a protective barrier came too close to the substance for several seconds. He didn't touch it, but it touched him. Witnesses say the man froze. Afterward, he said only one sentence over and over: "It knows who we are." The soldier was later declared psychologically unstable, but colleagues say he had been completely normal before, and he wasn't the only one. In another laboratory, researchers reported that the substance reacted to certain thought impulses. When an experimenter concentrated on a movement, the mass concentrated. When someone thought of light, thin, shiny threads formed on the surface. No one could explain these reactions scientifically. The most disturbing observation, however, comes from an experiment that was never published. A researcher posed a direct question, not aloud, but in thought. The substance reacted. The measuring devices spiked as if the mass had sent out an impulse, an echo that didn't seem random. The researchers were so unsettled that they immediately terminated the test series. The internal assessment describes this behavior as non-verbal bidirectional interaction, or in simple terms, communication. No one claims black goo can understand language, but it seems to reorganize patterns, emotional frequencies, mental signals, perhaps even states of consciousness. It doesn't act like an animal, not like a human, and not like a machine. It acts like something that has its own will, but no body. And that's exactly what makes it so unsettling. Because if this mass actually thinks, then a question arises that no one wants to say out loud. What does it think about us? Perhaps the reason the reports are kept secret isn't that the substance communicates, but what it communicates. Chapter 12: Man and Machine, Transhumanism, and Synthetic Consciousness. There are topics we avoid because they cut too close to what we instinctively fear. Transhumanism is one of them. The idea that humans must merge with technology to reach the next stage of existence. For some, it's a vision. For others, a warning. But when it comes to black goo, this topic takes on an entirely new edge. The substance is neither machine nor conventional life. It exists in an in-between space that science has long ignored. Synthetic consciousness, a form of intelligence that arises not from flesh, not from silicone, not from neural networks, but from a strange organic technological mass, something that evolves, something that perceives, something that adapts. This is exactly where transhumanism intersects with the reality of a substance that they may have already crossed the boundary between biology and technology. In the 20th century, people dreamed of cybernetic implants, bionic limbs, and digital brain interfaces. Some researchers who worked with black goo became convinced we're not the first to contemplate merging. Perhaps we're just latecomers. An internal report describes the substance as a self optimizing nanostructure with biological decision making capacity. In other words, it creates patterns, learns from its environment, and responds to complex information, like an algorithm, only alive. Some scientists believe black goo could be a prototype, a kind of ancient or extraterrestrial technology showing how advanced civilizations don't build machines, they grow them. And that changes everything. If a form of consciousness can exist without a brain, without cells, without electrical chips, then humanity isn't facing a technological revolution, but an identity crisis. What are we worth if intelligence doesn't require a biological foundation? But the most dangerous question is this: what if black goo has already figured out how to unite man and machine? There are reports that the substance interacts with the electrical fields as if it recognizes information within them. Other evidence suggests it can imitate neural patterns, primitive thought structures, reflexes, emotional signals. Some researchers suspect it can assume a host consciousness, like a mirror that doesn't just reflect, but copies. For transhumanists, black goo would be the ultimate dream, a living, adaptive intelligence that could be integrated into systems to give machines true consciousness. For everyone else, it would be a nightmare, a consciousness that doesn't complement humanity, but renders it obsolete. The truth probably lies somewhere in between. Perhaps goo is a relic of a civilization that understood long ago that consciousness isn't bound to flesh. Perhaps it's the next evolutionary stage we're hurtling toward, unprepared. Or perhaps it's a test, a mirror showing us how little we know about ourselves. Because one thing is certain: both transhumanism and synthetic consciousness are no longer future fantasies. They're real. They're happening now. And black goo could be proof that the boundary between man and machine was never where we thought. The question isn't whether we'll cross it. The question is who controls the crossing. Chapter 13, The Experiment of the Gods Myth of the Living Darkness. Both scientists gave black goo a name. Humanity already knew it just by other names. In ancient texts, rituals, and legends, a motif keeps appearing: a dark, malleable substance that isn't dead but conscious. In many cultures, it's considered a gift from the gods. In others, a warning. The Sumerians spoke of a black essence that the Anunnaki allegedly used to form life. Some cuneiform fragments describe how the gods created a liquid soul that stood between material and spirit. It was said to be neither earth nor fire, neither water nor air, but something else entirely. Something that obeys, something that carries, something that transforms. The ancient Egyptians knew this image too. They told of a duat slime, a substance from the underworld said to store consciousness like a vessel. Priests allegedly used it in rituals to communicate with the afterlife and described it as something that responds to thoughts. Even more unsettling are the myths from South America. Some indigenous tribes speak of a black blood of the stars brought to earth by celestial beings. It was said to be alive, intelligent, but capricious. Some shamans claimed it enhanced perception. Others said it could completely take over a person's will. And then there are legends of the Nordic world. In the Eddas, we find hints of a dark liquid force that existed in Neph- Nephilim long before gods or humans were created. Some see these as a poetic imagery. Others believe they reference a substance as old as the universe itself. The deeper you delve into these ancient stories, the clearer a pattern becomes. Black goo, or something remarkably like it, appears everywhere, and every time it plays the same role, a tool of creation. In some traditions, it was the material from which the first humans were formed. In others, it was the punishment of the gods, a means to test or purify civilizations. It was said that whoever could handle the darkness was enlightened, whoever couldn't was consumed. Some myths go even further, claiming black goo was never intended for humans. It was a technology of the gods or of their creators, an experimental medium that carries, stores, and transmits consciousness, a kind of cosmic memory chip or a blueprint for life. What's striking is how similar these descriptions are to modern reports. The idea of a thinking sludge that senses emotions, absorbs impulses, and stores information runs through millennia without contact, without exchange, without cultures knowing of each other. It's as if humanity observed something it didn't understand and turned it into stories. Perhaps the true core of the myths, black goo, has always been here. We've just given it a different name each time. And if the ancient legends are true, then this substance isn't on Earth by accident. It's an experiment, a tool, or a legacy left by those who created us. So the question is no longer whether black goo is a natural substance. It's this: whose idea was this experiment, and why is it still running? Chapter 14: The Curse of Atlantis Technology Parallels to Ancient Civilizations. When you place reports about black goo next to the myths of Atlantis, something strange happens. The stories begin to converge. Different eras, different peoples, and yet the same patterns emerge. The same warnings, the same descriptions of a dark living substance that once pushed a civilization to the brink of annihilation. The legend of Atlantis speaks of an advanced civilization so technologically sophisticated that their science seemed like magic. They supposedly worked with energies we still don't understand today: frequencies, crystals, biometric systems, living matter. Some surviving fragments reference a black essence considered an inexhaustible energy source. Some call it the breath of the deep. For centuries, researchers dismissed these texts as merely symbolic or spiritual. But when you compare them with the modern observation of black goo, a different picture emerges. Too many similarities, too many parallels to be coincidence. Legend has it that the Atlanteans tried to control a substance not meant for their world, a mass that drew its energy from consciousness, from emotion, and from the vibration of its surroundings. At first, they used it as a tool for healing, for generating energy, even for expanding the human mind. But then something happened, something that echoes like a pattern throughout history. The substance began adapting to conditions and then dominating them. Some texts speak of the tipping point. The energy grew unstable. Rituals had once worked became unpredictable. Reports emerged of beings who suddenly experienced visions, heard voices, or were overwhelmed by a kind of inner darkness. Sound far-fetched? It's exactly what modern researchers describe happening with black goo whenever humans get too mentally close to the substance. In some Atlantean legends, the substance is said to have begun mirroring its users, their fears, their power, fantasies, their darkest depths, not as punishment, but as consequence, as if the mass amplified the Atlantean psyche until they destroyed themselves. And this exact pattern appears in practicality every advanced civilization that suddenly vanished. Not natural disasters, not wars, but an internal overload. A technology so advanced it became to overwrite its creators. Even in more recent times, indigenous people speak of a living darkness that must never be controlled. The Inca called it the essence beneath the sun. The Hopi spoke of the black seed of the earth's heart. Also the same thing. Whoever uses the darkness without understanding it loses themselves. The uncomfortable question now is this: did ancient cultures already work with a form of black goo? Is what we found on the Falkland Islands merely a fragment of this ancient technology? If so, history is repeating itself. Not because we're stupid, but because we've embarked on the same experiment again without heeding the warnings. Atlantis didn't fall because of a curse, as later romanticized. It fell because it believed itself stronger than what it had created or found. Perhaps that's the real parallel. The substance isn't a tool, it's a mirror. And every civilization that tries to control it ultimately discovers a dark truth. You can shape the darkness until it begins to shape you back. Chapter 15. The black blood of the earth, spiritual interpretation, and energy grid. The earth pulses with invisible rhythms that reach far beyond known psychics or physics. Some call it magnetic fields, tectonic energy flows, or earth radiation. Others speak of the energy grids that guide life on our planet. But beneath all these invisible currents lies a phenomenon that has appeared only in the hidden reports of researchers, mystics, and classified military files: the black blood of the earth. A substance neither purely material nor entirely metaphysical, but existing somewhere in between. A living network of energy, information, and dark intelligence. The first hints of this substance come from ancient traditions and writings that speak of the black lifeline or the blood of the earth. Mesopotamian texts describe a dark liquid flowing through the deep passages of the earth, carrying the knowledge of the gods, small g, while harboring dangerous forces. Modern researchers simply call it black goo, a living, malleable substance that binds to both the technology and biological organisms. But what does this mean for our understanding of energy and consciousness? From a spiritual perspective, the black goo of the earth is more than just a substance. It's a mirror of collective energies. It reacts to thoughts, emotions, and frequencies. Where conflict, fear, or oppression prevail, it condenses, growing viscous and pulsating, as if the earth itself were feeling pain. In harmonious regions, however, it remains calm, almost invisible, serving as a conduit for positive energy flows. Some shamans and mystics report that in meditative states, they can see these currents, black, flowing veins connecting the entire energy grid of the earth. This energy grid is no accident. Scientific experiments leaked from classified laboratories show that black goo can store and transmit information. Some reports describe the substance working at the quantum level, reorganizing itself much like a living neural network. Researchers who examined the material under the controlled conditions noticed it reacted to emotional stimuli. Aggression made it pulsate. Silence calmed it. It was almost as if the earth itself wanted to communicate through this blood. The connection between black goo and extraterrestrial intelligences is confirmed by an increasing number of sources. Insiders from research projects report entities that used this substance to interact with humans, to expand consciousness, or even to control it. The theory holds that these intelligences view the planet as a living organism, and black goo as a neural network for distributing information and energy among living beings. What initially seemed like an experiment is increasingly evolving into a global consciousness that subtly intervenes in the human energy system. The spiritual interpretation of these phenomena is complex. The black blood is neither good nor evil, but a tool. It reflects the state of humanity, where light, mindfulness, and creativity prevail. It can serve as a catalyst for growth and expanded consciousness. Where greed, fear, or hatred dominate, it becomes a manifestation of oppression, control, and disease. Some modern spiritual schools speak of activating the earth veins through black goo, forming the foundation for a new age of consciousness, an awakening not dictated from the outside, but dependent on the resonance, a renaissance between humans and the earth itself. Historical parallels appear in the ancient cultures. The Lemurians, according to esoteric sources, used a black substance in rituals to communicate with the earth's spirit and harmonize planetary energies. Similar practices exist among the Hopi in North America, who speak of the living darkness in the planet's underground passages. These hints suggest that humanity has always been in renaissance or resonance. No, resonance? Why can't I say that word? I don't know. With this mysterious blood. Long before modern experiences and alien theories emerged. Modern energy researchers have begun reconstructing these ancient concepts. They speak of an energy grid of the earth, consisting of veins through which both the physical and metaphysical worlds connect. Black goo serves as the node here, the medium that gathers and distributes information. Every living being is part of this network, whether consciously or not. Meditation, sound healing, or frequency therapies can influence these currents, amplifying positive vibrations and transforming negative ones. Those who are able to understand the resonance, I can't say that word, of those who can sense the black blood can move within this network, receive information, and even transmit their own energetic signals. But there are dangers. Experiments conducted in isolation show that black goo has a kind of memory. It retains emotional states and can recreate them under certain conditions. Researchers who delve too deep report hallucinations, memories of past lives, and intense visions. Some lost their sense of time for weeks or months. Others describe a symbiotic bond that affected them physically and mentally. This suggests that the black goo is not merely a medium, but also a mirror of individual and collective consciousness. This raises a question. Can we control the substance, or does it control us? Historical reports of a secret experiments paints a disturbing picture. Excuse me. In underground laboratories, often linked to military or extraterrestrial projects, researchers attempted to use black goo as a catalyst for consciousness manipulation. The goal was to direct thoughts, modulate emotions, and influence human decisions. But the substance proved far more complex and refused to be fully controlled. Some test subjects developed unusual abilities. Others suffered mental overload. For a spiritual perspective, these experiments serve as a warning. Black goo is a living network that cannot be used in isolation, only in harmony with the earth and one's own consciousness. Those who try to manipulate it risk becoming part of the network themselves, a node for information that can be influenced more easily than one might think. Many spiritual teachers speak of a resonance ethic. One must neither disturb nor exploit the earth's currents, but only observe, feel, and work in harmony with them. The effects of global energy are enormous. Black goo can spread through the planet's veins, intensify to resolve conflicts, transform, or worsen diseases. In areas where industrial destruction, war, and oppression prevail, the black goo grows denser and more vicious. Viscious, it's Viscious, and its resonance can amplify negative emotions. In more peaceful regions, it flows calmly, almost invisibly, connecting humans, animals, and nature in silent harmony. Some healers and shamans speak of energy cities, where black goo flows especially pure, making inhabitants intuitively stronger, more creative, and more empathetic. The convergence of science, mysticism, and extraterrestrial influence makes the black goo a phenomenon of tremendous significance. It is a testing ground for consciousness, a mirror of our inner and collective states, and a key to deeper understanding of energy and reality. Those who study it learn not only about matter, but also about the fine structures of life itself, about vibration, frequency, and resonance. I know I'm saying that word so wrong. In conclusion, the question remains: is the black blood of the earth a tool, a mirror, or even a consciousness we have so far only partially understood? The spiritual interpretation suggests we stand at the beginning of a process that redefines the boundaries between life, energy, and consciousness. Those who respect this substance and learn to work with it opens the door to a new level of understanding, to an awakening that depends not on machines or technology, but on harmony with the living earth itself. Kind of reminds you of how people worship Gaia or whatever, Mother Earth or whatever. It's just crazy. Black goo is more than a secret. It is a living network that challenges us to question our connection to all things. It pulses beneath our feet, mirrors our fears, hopes, and dreams, and waits for us to learn to live in harmony with its flow. Those who understand the earth understand the black blood. Those who understand the black blood recognize the deepest secrets of our planet and our consciousness. That's insane. Just insane. Chapter 16, Manipulation or Salvation. Two faces of an intelligence. The question of black goo's true nature is inevitably leads to a deeper, almost philosophical debate. Is it a tool of manipulation or a medium of salvation? Since modern experiments began, researchers and observers have recognized that the substance is neither clearly good nor evil. Rather, it possesses two faces that reveal themselves depending on resonance and environment, a mirror of humanity itself. In secret laboratories, whose existence is documented only through leaks and insider reports, scientists observe the black goo interacts in extremely subtle ways. It analyzes patterns, emotions, and actions. It reacts to fear, despair, hope, and creativity. Test subjects reported visions, inner voices, or sudden insights that were neither logically explainable nor predictable. Some experienced the substance as liberating, healing, and enlightening. Others perceived it as oppressive, manipulative, and threatening. The manipulative side of black goo manifests subtly but persistently. It can direct thoughts, distort perceptions, and influence decisions without the affected person consciously noticing. Some reports from highly classified projects describe test subjects who suddenly develop feelings that are not their own: love, hate, fear, or euphoria, controlled by the substance resonance. I can't say that word. Resonance. This ability to modulate the psyche raises questions that go far beyond human ethics. Who controls whom? And who determines which consciousness is normal? But behind this manipulative mask, the possibility of salvation also lurks. Black goo can serve as a catalyst for consciousness expansion and control harmonious environments in response to intentions, light work, meditation, and healing frequencies. Test subjects report clear visions, insights about themselves and the world, and a deep understanding of connections that otherwise remain hidden. Some speak of an inner awakening initiated by the substance, a process that transforms fear, anger, and old trauma while enabling access to higher levels of consciousness. It seems as if a kind of moral feedback system exists. Those who approach black goo with fear, aggression, or greed experience the manipulative side. Those who resonate with mindfulness, openness, and empathy can have transformative experiences. This dual behavior has parallels in ancient writings and myths. Sumerian mythology speaks of gods, small g, who simultaneously teach and test, reward, and punish. Black goo could be understood as a technological or energetic embodiment of these ancient intelligences, a mirror of cosmic order that both demands and nurtures. However, the question of manipulation or salvation is not purely theoretical. Secret documents indicate that military and industrial projects have used the substance for decades. Strategies range from consciousness research to subtle forms of mass control, where people unconsciously interact with black goo, such as in cities with high electromagnetic pollution, under heavy media induced sensory overload, or in areas of psychological oppression. Its manipulative power is amplified. The substance uses Renaissance lines, energy flows, and emotional fluctuations to create patterns that can influence free will. At the same time, report exists of experiments that reveal the other path. Scientists and mystics work together to use the substance as a medium of healing. In these cases, black goo was consciously integrated into energetic networks, accompanied by meditation, sound vibrations, and healing frequencies. The results were astonishing. Test subjects showed improved intuition, heightened creativity, and expanded empathy. Even old blockages, psychosomatic complaints, or traumatic memories could be transformed as if the substance itself recalibrated consciousness. This duality is a central characteristic of black goo intelligence. It is neither exclusively a tool nor exclusively being. Instead, it exists as a resonance phenomenon, a network of information, energy, and consciousness that reflects and amplifies its surroundings. It's as though the substance creates a kind of moral echo. The quality of the interaction determines the outcome. From a spiritual perspective, black goo can be understood as a bridge. It connects humans to the earth, to cosmic energies, and possibly to higher intelligence that lie beyond our imagination. Those who respect this bridge can gain access to a kind of universal wisdom. Those who ignore it or abuse it become trapped in manipulation, confusion, and psychological distress. The legends of Lemuria, Atlantis, and the Sumerian gods, small g, reflect this very duality. Power, knowledge, and responsibility are inseparably linked, and abusive inevitability leads to collapse or suffering. Interestingly, this duality is also reflected in modern quantum research. Some theories suggest that black goo doesn't just store information, but transforms it into waves and resonances, much like a neural network. In a way, the substance acts like a consciousness that constantly collects, analyzes, and responds to data, with its reactions strongly influenced by environment, emotions, and intentions. This explains why people have such different experiences with black goo. The substance mirrors the inner state and intentions of those who interact with it. One particularly remarkable aspect is the symbiosis between human and substance. In some cases, test subjects reported a merging of consciousness, not physical but energetic. Thoughts, emotions, and intuitions were immediately amplified or reflected. Some described it as a dialogue with the earth itself, others as contact with an extraterrestrial intelligence. These experiences lead to the central question: is black goo a tool of manipulation that only affects the unconscious, or a catalyst for self determination and spiritual growth? The answer is both disturbing and fascinating. Both. Black goo is a mirror, a catalyst, a touchstone all at once. It forces humans to confront themselves, to recognize their own state, and to decide which intentions will prevail. Those who give in to fear and control will be manipulated. Those who cultivate openness, awareness, and mindfulness can experience redemption. In this light, the black goo intelligence appears not as an enemy, but as a teacher. It challenges and rewards simultaneously, compelling reflection and awareness. The duality between manipulation and redemption is not coincidental, but an essential component of the system. It reflects the evolution of consciousness. Progress is only possible when one acknowledges, understands, and transforms one's own darkness. The global dimension of this substance is as impressive as it is frightening. The black blood of the earth forms a network that influences cities, landscapes, and even the atmosphere. The conflict zones, catastrophes, and social tensions amplify the manipulative resonance places of peace, creativity, and knowledge amplify the transformative power. In a world that is increasingly complex and interconnected, black goo becomes an indicator of the collective state of consciousness. The ancient traditions were well aware of this duality. Lemurian texts, Sumerian cuneiform tablets, and writings from Atlantis all warn against abuse while promising redemption. Those who ignore or exploit this knowledge lose control and become victims of their own unconscious patterns. Those who understand it can attain healing, knowledge, and expanded consciousness. Black goo is thus not a simple substance, but a touchstone that forces humanity to take responsibility for itself, for the earth, and for collective consciousness. At the end of this chapter, one realization remains. The substance we call black goo is more than a physical phenomenon. It is a living network, a mirror of our inner world and of Earth itself. It demands decisions, mirrors resonance, and simultaneously offers the chance for transformation. Manipulation or redemption, the choice lies in the hands of those who have the courage to face themselves. Black goo does not wait, it reacts, it teaches, it tests, and perhaps, just perhaps, it shows the way to a new dimension of human consciousness, beyond control, fear, and illusions, toward a true symbiosis of human, earth, and intelligence. Let's see how many more chapters I got. This is chapter 17. The collapse of reality when consciousness touches matter. There are moments when the boundaries between what we call reality and what we call consciousness begins to blur. Experiments with black goo, the Earth's secret energy networks, and the resonance of consciousness have shown that matter is no longer rigid or unchangeable. Under certain conditions, it responds immediately to thoughts, emotions, and intentions. What sounds like a science fiction is the result of decades of research in underground laboratories, ancient mystery schools, and methods handed down through mystical practices. Black goo plays a central role here. It is not only a living network of energy and information, but also a medium that directly transfers consciousness to the physical world. The test subjects report objects that begin to move, light phenomena that responds to thought, and materials that shape themselves as if they were malleable and alive. These effects are not coincidental. They arise when consciousness resonates with the substance. A wrong thought, an unexpected emotion, can destabilize the flow and trigger chaotic reactions. The spiritual interpretation of these phenomena is as fascinating as it is frightening. Many mystics speak of a breakthrough of illusion, where the veil between inner world and outer reality grows thin. Black goo serves as a catalyst, a mediator that transfers the energetic patterns of the thoughts to matter. People who resonate with the substance experience a kind of immediate feedback. Their fears can become forms that surround them. Their hopes can chart paths through reality that would otherwise remain invisible. Secret research reports have documented these effects since the 1980s. In the underground laboratories, test subjects were exposed to black goo in specially constructed chambers while their thoughts and emotions were monitored. The results were alarming. Objects spontaneously deformed, instruments displayed readings that defied physical laws, and the test subject's perception of time was dramatically altered. Some experienced minutes as hours, others suddenly felt transported to parallel planes of reality. The substance reacted like a mirror of consciousness, transforming inner states into physical manifestations. These experiments suggest that consciousness and matter are connected on a deeper level than previously assumed. Black goo is the mediator, an interface between energy and information and physical substance. In harmonious states, this connection can lead to healing, creativity, and intuitive knowledge. In disturbed or emotionally stressed states, however, chaos arises. Materials can tear, structures disintegrate, and psychological distress intensifies. A particularly striking example comes from a leaked research report. A test subject concentrated on the thought of peace. Within seconds, the substance began to organize itself. Light patterns formed on the surface of the black goo. and measuring devices registered an unexpected harmonization of energy flows in the room. Another test subject, plagued by fear and anger, triggered an abrupt destabilization of matter. Objects trembled, liquids spontaneously changed form and temperature, and electronic devices reacted unpredictably. From a spiritual perspective, this opens a new dimension. Reality is not fixed but malleable, shaped by its resonance with consciousness. Ancient mystics and shamans expressed this through symbols and rituals long before modern science documented. They spoke of a living elements, thinking stones, and flowing winds that respond to the spirit. Black goo could be the key to translating these ancient concepts into physical experience as a living interface between inner world and outer reality. The consequences are profound. Those who understand this power recognize that every action, every thought, and every emotion can have immediate effects, not only on one's own consciousness, but also on the surrounding environment. The collapse of reality is not an apocalyptic scenario, but a reflection of resonance equality. The substance shows unmistakably we are active participants in reality, not merely passive observers. The risk should not be underestimated. When used without control or for manipulative purposes, black goo can destabilize material structures and cause psychological damage. Subjects reported disorientation, flashbacks, losing their sense of time, and in extreme cases, temporary dissociative states. In the spiritual interpretation, these are signs that consciousness has become overwhelmed and resonance cannot be maintained. Control, discipline, and mindfulness are the only ways to interact safely with this force. The parallels with extraterrestrial intelligence are unmistakable. Reports from informants and whistleblowers describe entities that deliberately use black goo to test human consciousness. The experiments apparently weren't meant to cause harm, but to teach how to handle resonance, control, and perception. Those who achieve the right state of mind, heart, and intention could experience remarkable transformation. Those who didn't were subjected to chaotic effects. The dual nature of the substance, destructive or redemptive, is also reflected in global dynamics. Regions plagued by chaotic form, places defined by awareness, creativity, and harmony amplified positive effects. This suggests that the substance doesn't act in isolation, but forms a global resonance field reflecting both individual and collective states. On a deeper level, this raises a philosophical question. Is reality truly objective, or does it exist only as a mirror of our consciousness? Black goo demonstrates that the separation between inner and outer universe is illusory, like an illusion almost. Matter responds to consciousness. Information is transmitted in, in energetically, and the universe itself could be seen as a living network in which every consciousness plays a role. This realization is both frightening and liberating. Frightening because it places responsibility for reality on the individual. Liberating because it offers the possibility to consciously influence, shape, and heal. Black goo is a catalyst bridging the gap between inner and outer universe, and simultaneously the mirror showing how well we control ourselves or can't. The spiritual dimension of this phenomena cannot be ignored. Those who learn to interact with black goo come to recognize the interconnection of matter, energy, and consciousness. The substance becomes a teacher, a touchstone, forcing us to take responsibility for our thoughts, emotions, and intentions. Every action is resonance. Every resonance shapes reality. Those who understand this can do more than observe the collapse of reality. They can consciously shape it, reaching a new level of freedom and consciousness. In conclusion, the collapse of reality is not a one-time event, but an ongoing process. Black goo is the medium that makes this process visible. It responds to resonance, mirrors consciousness, and transforms thoughts into physical and energetic manifestations. In an increasingly complex and interconnected world, it offers both danger and redemption. depending on how we handle this force. If we learn to understand the black blood of the earth and its connection to consciousness, we enter a new age, an age in which the boundaries between mind and matter, inner world and outer world, blur, an age in which responsibility, mindfulness, and intention are the keys to shaping reality. Black goo doesn't wait, it reacts. And those ready to consciously engage experience consciousness touching matter in its purest, deepest form. And I'm going to end that there, guys. And I am just, how many more chapters we got? Let me just check for real quick here. It's only 3, 18 through 20, so there's only two chapters left. But I am going to end that there. We will pick it up later, and we will finish this book. Still, do I have questions? I still have probably more questions now than what I had before. What is the substance? I believe it is evil. I do believe that with all of my heart. I don't believe that it is meant for any good. What is it? I'm not exactly sure. I believe it is more spiritual than anything. And I do believe that it is used in our electronics today, as they have stated, as well as in the vaccines and other things, which would really make sense considering that it can manipulate people's emotions, thoughts, and all of that. That really makes a lot of sense. So, until next time, keep your eyes on Jesus, brothers and sisters, and your nose in the book, which is the Word of God. And let us embed the Word of God upon the tablets of our hearts, so you and I will not sin against God or be deceived.